Saturday, May the 11th, 1968.
I would just like to say a very brief word for the benefit of our visitors this morning about the baby naming ceremony, which is an innovation in Jewish life. As you all know, the Jewish boy is named at the ceremony of circumcision Brit, as indeed Samuel Jeremy Bardfeld initially was thus named. But in this synagogue, which is a Reconstructionist synagogue, we are endeavoring to remedy some of the inequities in Jewish tradition between men and women. One of the best known innovations is the introduction in this congregation many years ago now of the ceremony of bat mitzvah, where not only the boy at the age of 13 comes to the bimah and is accepted in a formal ceremony among the Jewish people, but that the girl also has the bat mitzvah ceremony. Now, one of the innovations we have also introduced in recent years is to equalize the injustice committed against children at an earlier age when they cannot answer back for themselves. Now, the boy is named at a circumcision ceremony, which, true, is somewhat attenuated today from what it was 10 or 20 years ago, but the girl was often named in absentia. The mother was probably in hospital, and the father would rush to shul the first week after the birth, and in a very hushed and hurried ceremony in which many members in the congregation didn't know what was going on, whether it was a birth, a death, a yahrzeit, or something else, the child was hurriedly and surreptitiously named, and no one was the wiser for it. Now, we still not only endorse but insist on the validity, the importance, and the seriousness for Jewish male children of the circumcision ceremony with all its traditional trapping. But we have added to the Brit Milah ceremony for boys and all the traditional paraphernalia which goes along with it, this ceremony, which is for boys and for girls in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th month, or even later, so long as they're not too heavy, ceremony whereby they both may be brought to the bimah with their parents. And I feel the significance and the meaning of this innovation speaks for itself, that the naming of a baby, the giving of a Jewish name to a baby, isn't something which should be done surreptitiously, either in the home or in the hospital, but should be done in the congregation, in the community to which the family belongs. And so if there are any more babies on the way, or any who are here already and who qualify, please contact the synagogue during the coming week. Our English reading this morning is on page 343 in the prayer book. And by way of introduction, I would like to ask any member of the congregation or any of our visitors who reads the Wall Street Journal and who has yesterday's copy, if they would be so kind as to forward it to me. I am very pleased to learn from several indirect sources that I had a letter published there. I don't read the Wall Street Journal, and also, since I write regular letters to the New York Times and never have any letters published, I was rather surprised and puzzled, a little frustrated by writing one single letter to the Wall Street Journal and having it published. I can only assume they're short of letters, and that when they become as powerful as the New York Times, I'll have the same difficulty there. I haven't seen it yet, but by way of introduction to our English prayer this morning, I thought it would be interested to say a few words about how the letter got there in the first place and what its gist was. I can't read it to you because I haven't got it, but I hope somebody will send it on to me. I received some weeks ago, as a result of a sermon preached on the subject of civil rights, 2 separate letters, among others. It seems to me that a Shabbat where the Maftir begins, the Haftarah begins, Haloch hivnei chushiyim atem li b'nei Israel. Are ye not unto me as the children of the Ethiopians, saith the Lord? Are ye not unto me as the Negroes, O Jewish people, saith the Lord? Is a fit Sabbath to at least skirt on this subject from this point of view. After this sermon, I got these 2 letters, both of which included an article from the Wall Street Journal. Some of you may have read. By the way, how many people read the Wall Street Journal? No. I thought it was only read by people who are on the stock exchange, and then not for articles on Judaism. However, there was this article which was written because of something that a rabbi who, I don't want to mention by name, it's not really relevant. A rabbi had given a rousing speech in some part of New York in which he had said that the problem of the Negro is really of no concern of the Jewish people, nor really are any of the other grievous issues affecting American life today really the concern of the Jewish people. In fact, this rabbi said, if people would only realize that religion is to do with the individual, the anguish of the soul in the bedroom, the heart-searching that goes on, the angst, the quest on the part of the individual for meaningful personal life, for a belief in immortality, for prayer, for God. And the author, the anonymous author of this column in the Wall Street Journal, had jumped on this rabbi's words and embraced them with open arms. You see, the anonymous author said, you see what rabbis, in the plural already, are saying. These problems of social action are not really the concern of religion. Religion is to do with praying, with man's soul before God, with existential dread and fear, all those things which traditionally we have been accustomed to associate religion with. Now, of course, it is interesting to note that this anonymous author of this column must have been reading the sayings of rabbis from Stephen Wise onwards, in which hundreds and hundreds of rabbis must have expressed precisely the opposite viewpoint, because it doesn't sound like a Jewish viewpoint. However, the first rabbi apparently he chooses to quote verbatim and at great length in the Wall Street Journal happens to be a rabbi who endorses his viewpoint that true religion has nothing to do with helping one's fellow man, but rather is related to achieving a right attitude on the part of the individual with God. Now, a few days later, I received 2 copies of this article cut out from the Wall Street Journal, which I say I don't read. One of them was anonymous. And I don't like getting anonymous letters, especially from people who come to the SAJ. Seems to be a breach of something very, very important. When people who come to the SAJ and sit in these seats and listen to a rabbi preaching, and listen to our cantors singing, and listen to the choir singing, and listen to the total overall effect of what goes on here, to go away and send an anonymous letter to the rabbi doesn't seem to me to be cricket. Well, I suppose it takes all sorts to make a world, and normally I wouldn't have given them that a second thought. But another copy of the self-same article arrived, not anonymously, but with an endorsing letter by a very distinguished member of the SAJ. It's on the Board of Trustees. You can keep on guessing. And he said that he was angry when he read this article. The chutzpah of this anonymous writer to cotton on to the one rabbi over the last 10, 15, 20 years who has come out so radically against the concept that religion should be involved in social action. I mean, if you read the Catholic newspapers, the Protestant newspapers, the Christian Century, Commonweal, even America, the Jesuit magazine, everyone agrees that the secular world cannot be the place which is ignored and avoided by the religious man today. That wherever else God may be found, and the title of our English prayer this morning is Where We Can Find God, maybe in the synagogue and church, but certainly must be found in the street, where the action is, where the great problems in life are being struggled and wrestled with. And after all said and done, I had to take very seriously a behest from a member of the congregation, and especially of the Board of Trustees. He asked me whether I would consider replying to this anonymous article in the Wall Street Journal. And of course, I'm always delighted to reply to anything. And I penned me a letter. And as I say, I don't have it with me, but apparently yesterday it was published, and indirectly from several people I've heard, and I'd love to see it because I think I probably have a copy somewhere around. But I just wanted to tell you that in case the person who wrote the anonymous sent me the article anonymously in the synagogue, I want him or her to know that I didn't write to the Wall Street Journal because of that, because I knew the spirit in which that one came. It came as if a kind of a shtoch, as if to say, you see, Rabbi, real religion, you see what real religion really is? It isn't getting busy with the idea of our Haftarah this morning, "Are ye not unto me as the children of the Ethiopians, saith the Lord." An idea that the Jews have to consider themselves in the framework of other peoples, other ethnic groups, and other civilizations. And I want the person who wrote the article, who of course knows the reason why I replied to it, to understand what a wonderful thing it is that here am I who do not read the Wall Street Journal, but can yet pick up cudgels on behalf of someone who does. And many of us really a prime obligation devolves upon us. Sometimes we can't do a job ourselves in a certain area of principle or a certain area of value, and often the task falls upon us of seeing that at least something is done about it. Now, please don't let me have a rush of articles from various magazines on Monday, because we have the job of running the synagogue, and it's not possible to spend all one's time writing articles. But I was rather moved that the anger of one member of our congregation who felt strongly that something should be done about what I thought was a rather scurrilous article, using a rabbi, I am sure for purposes he wasn't even intending his speech or his words to be used for, should have led to something positive, at least from my point of view. And this is the spirit in which I think we should all do our reading on current events. And so for the purposes of this morning, the way they rename Times Square occasionally for specific purposes, instead of calling our prayer on page 343, the bottom of page 343, where we can find God, I think we should title it for this morning, God Can Be Found Where the Action Is, which was the gist of my letter, that in the synagogue we come to reflect and ponder and meditate upon the true meaning of religion, but the source and the mainspring of our meditation must inevitably come from the outside world where the action is. And this is a profoundly important concept for all of us in the world today. And as we read the prayer, we will see that the poet whose words have been incorporated in our traditional liturgy also feels that God may be found where the action is. Mordecai Kaplan has written that we short-circuit religion when we treat it as purely a matter between the individual and God. We short-circuit religion when we treat it as a purely personal matter between man and God. For a religion to function effectively, I'm quoting from memory, so it may not be exactly correct, but it's very much the idea that Kaplan writes. For religion to function effectively, it must first be mediated. The current of true religion must first be mediated through the life of a people. And for that people to mediate effectively the current which is religion, that people must be involved in all those areas where in the modern world the action is, where we can find God. And now, today has been declared Jewish Family Sabbath. And the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies, which is a prime supporter of the Jewish Family Service, the largest casework counseling agency in the country, last year responded to over 15,000 calls from families in need of help from every social, educational, and economic level in our community, has asked all rabbis to speak about the importance of the Jewish family. It is always a pleasure to talk about and to extol the virtues of the Jewish family. The Jewish family life from the days of our earliest history has been a source of joy to us, and a source of envy to the Gentile world. Our most cherished Jewish memories go back to family men. Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father, Yitzchak Habein Hane'ekad, Isaac the son, Jacob the brother, Sarah, Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel the mothers. The first book of the Torah is the story of a family. And the extent to which is a story of the family may be seen if we compare it with the equivalent Greek book, the Timaeus by Plato. Here we have the way in which the Greeks viewed the problem of cosmogony compared with the Jewish view of the cosmogony, the theory, the origin, the creation of the world. The Greeks look at the cosmos in terms of harmony. Human beings are unpredictable and therefore are a source of embarrassment. One never knows what human beings are going to do next. They are relegated to a relatively unimportant corner of the universe. Stars in their courses, there the Greeks find beauty. The heavenly harmonies, the music of the spheres, there the Greeks find harmony and beauty, the perfection of celestial motion. But in the Jewish book of Timaeus, Bereshit, the first book of the Bible, we have a very brief history of the creation of the heavens and the earth and all their hosts, and then immediately on with the action. Families with tensions, squabbles, fights, aggravation, alienation, estrangement, and of course reconciliation. Which family is entirely without these. Read the book of Genesis and see how at the heart of the first opening book of Jewish tradition, a family in full flower with all that it means in a family. And yet, transcending the petty dimension of human life, there emerges from the book of Genesis the overwhelming grandeur of men and women growing to maturity, of families in the company of and ultimately in cooperation with other families, seeking for God in life and finding God, seeking for the purpose and meaning of life in life, and not in the cloisters, and there discovering it. In the book of Proverbs, in that chapter which Jewish husbands read to their wives on Erev Shabbat, Eshet Chayil Miyimtza, a woman of worth who can find, volumes are there spoken on the sanctity and profound importance of Jewish family life. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. The historians of the Jewish people, Josephus, Philo, the authors of rabbinic literature and of the She'elot Uteshuvot responsa literature, all speak of the beauty of Jewish family life. It has been said that one of the reasons for intermarriage today is that Gentile girls actually seek out Jewish men because they have a reputation for being good husbands. There is truth statistically in the observation, but not in the reason or rationale. There is some confusion in this argument. For there is nothing intrinsic in the Jew which makes him a good husband or the creator of a good Jewish family. Indeed, the Jewish husband, in what sociologists refer to as the nuclear family, consisting of husband, wife, and children. The Jewish husband in this small nuclear family of husband, wife, and children, unless there is there a capital of Jewish values inherited from the parental home of father and mother, can soon degenerate into the typical standard family type. It always worried me why Arthur Miller never spelled out that Willie Loman's family was Jewish. I was talking to somebody last week and they said to me some American critic wrote a long article in a long book that Arthur Miller wasn't fair because in fact his family was Jewish. What sort of a family did Arthur Miller know about? A Jewish family. But that somehow he avoided the issue by pretending that this was not a Jewish family. So some critics think that Willie Loman was a Jew, for his creator, after all, was a Jew. And as a rabbi, I have known some of the Willie Lomans of Jewish life. Now there in Arthur Miller's play, that pathetic, tragic play of this pathetic, tragic little family, encapsulated within their four walls, wanting to be well spoken of and well thought of in terms of their miserable, limited aims and goals and ideals. There was the nuclear family in all its unglory, hermetically sealed off from the community in the present, in the past, and ultimately in Willie from the future. I think it was a Jewish family. They didn't even have a mezuzah on the door or a Chanukiah on the, you call it the mantelpiece? The last vestige of bygone glory, even if it's never dusted year in, year out, God forbid touched. The strength of the Jewish husband is not intrinsic. There's nothing in the Jewish blood of the male which makes him a better husband. Forget about it. The Jewishness of the husband is a function, not of the individual Jew male, but nor even of his immediate Willie Loman-esque family, but of the extended family. The family which includes grandparents and great-grandparents. And that is why I, as a rabbi, am so deeply moved during the reading of the Torah, when a baby is brought to this bima, and in the congregation there stands up the family. As a matter of fact, I just happened to realize this morning that the Bardfeld grandparents were here. I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting them before, and then I saw other people stood up, and maybe this is something which we should introduce, as it were, as another innovation. I believe in the Sephardi synagogue on Saturday morning. Now, I'm unable to visit other synagogues on Sabbath morning. I'm usually working. But I understand that in some Sephardi synagogues, when a man has an aliyah, his family stand up. Right? Right. Now, just, why should the Sephardim have all the good tunes? If this is a nice idea, maybe it would be a very nice idea that we should know who the family is. Because we Reconstructionists always stress that it is not the individual which is the basic unit of our social life, but the family. And of course, when we have a bar mitzvah, the family stands up. and recites the Shechianu, but maybe on other occasions, such as the naming of a baby, when the family does stand out in relief, as it were, with relief and in relief, at this important milestone in life, it seems to me that a great deal of meaning is given to the whole ceremony by the parents and the grandparents and everybody else standing up in association with this rite of passage in human life. Now, the extended family, as opposed to the Willy Loman nuclear family of father, mother, and children, the extended family includes aunts and uncles and grandparents and great-grandparents and nephews and nieces and nachschleppers and everybody. Everybody's included in the extended family, which, alas, so many Jewish families only see on Pesach and at funerals. And it is so important that there should be other occasions in the course of the cycle of the year when the whole family, there are rare exceptions. We've got some here in the synagogue. But the exceptions prove the rule, that most of us, unfortunately, only get together on the sad occasions in life. And the joyous, but they are very few and far between. The strength of the Jewish husband is related to the extended family, and as Jewish husband, there is a lineal and spatial extension to a larger family no longer living in the past, and to a family yet unborn in the future. Jewish history in the past, global Jewish existence in the present, and Jewish destiny in the future. The nuclear family is the atom. The extended family is the molecular complex. Erik Erikson writes in Childhood and Society, and I quote, "A man must accept one's one and only life cycle as something that had to be in order to achieve maturity." He uses the word ego integrity. A man must accept his one and only life cycle as something that had to be, and that by necessity permitted of no substitutions. It means a new and a different love of one's parents. Although aware of the relativity of all the various lifestyles which have given meaning to human striving, the man who possesses integrity is ready to defend the dignity of his own lifestyle against all physical and economic threats. For he knows that an individual life is the accidental coincidence of but one life cycle with but one segment of history, and that for him all human integrity stands or falls with the one style of integrity of which he partakes. End quote. And echoing that beautiful description of ego integrity, we might ask, what then for the Jew is ego integrity? And with this distinguished psychiatrist, we might answer that every Jew must sooner or later accept his one and only life cycle as a Jew as something that had to be, and that he must sooner or later accept his parents, achieve a new love, a new understanding, and a new compassion for his mother and his father. And what are the parents of the Jew? Not only his mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Willy Loman, but his grandparents and his great-grandparents and his great-great-grandparents, the Avot. They are the parents, a total ancestry, which the Jew who wishes to achieve ego integrity is called upon to understand and identify with. You would like to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant? You are a Jew. Look at yourself. If it is fate, you must transform it into faith. It is all that you will have this time round. The nuclear family, hermetically sealed off from meaningful involvement with community, compared to the extended family, is amoral and immoral. It may survive one generation or two on capital garnered by the past, which it unwittingly dissipates, and then it declines. For the extended family has the support not only of its own members, it has the involvement with the whole people, its rituals, its symbols, its texts, its high days and the holy days. These mitzvot, these sanctified extended family behavior patterns, do not need the sanction of any supernatural deity to afford them intrinsic merit. Their justification is that as the creation of a people to give dignity and holiness to the ongoing life of the people, they elevate the nuclear family from its private and often trivial concerns and enable it to participate in however small a level in the work of ages and the work of the eternal. Now, I'm not saying that if Willie Loman had made Kiddush on Friday evening, his family wouldn't have gone to the dogs the way it did anyway. There's no guarantee that just because you make Kiddush on Friday evening, you're not going to avoid the trouble that all family flesh is heir to. But somehow one gets the impression, looking at that play, that if Mrs. Loman had been a member of the women's division or the sisterhood, and there'd been a youth group around somewhere, there had been some kind of standards, some kind of exemplars, somebody to identify with, maybe the family wouldn't have sunk as low as they in fact did. One has to relate one's own petty little self to the grand revelation of God in the creative life of a people. You cannot go it alone in this world. It cannot be done. And that's not just a moral injunction, it's a prudential injunction. You want to try? Go ahead. But don't forget, we warned you. Tragically, in the modern world, so many Jews reject the supernatural God and at the same time reject the mitzvot, the patterns of Jewish ritual behavior, which they believe, wrongly, are inextricably bound up with that supernatural God. In other words, their argument is, if I cannot believe in that kind of a God, then obviously I cannot believe in the kind of Torah that that God is supposed to have given. Therefore, the mitzvot are out. There is no rationale for performing any of the traditional Jewish symbolism. But the mitzvot seen within the framework of the supernaturalist universe of discourse is only one way, a legitimate way for the Orthodox Jew, but only one way of looking at the mitzvot. Mordecai Kaplan, echoing the words of Santayana, has described the mitzvot as religious poetry in action. Guardians and protectors of Jewish family life, composed by thousands of Jewish spiritual geniuses over a period of almost 4,000 years. Their divinity is in the holiness with which they can invest life, not in their imagined supernaturalistic source. And so, misguided by a false theology, countless Jewish families have divested themselves of the lineal extension of their Jewish family and go it alone as nuclear. I wonder whether Willie Loman ever set foot into some conservative or reformed synagogue. Spring Valley doesn't seem to be up his alley anyway, and been, repulsed. Did somebody at any stage in the life of that family do something that turned them away from some life-giving source of creative communal life? It's a horrible thought. I'm not suggesting that extended Jewish families are always mentally healthy. I'm not suggesting that the family which prays together always stays together, nor that the nuclear family is always a failure. I would not suggest that Jewish marriages never fail, or that intermarriages never succeed. But the statistics, the evidence, the theory, and the practice all point in the same direction. Other things being equal, the extended family, which recognizes eternity and not just history, which participates in the conservation and renewal of tradition, not just the preservation of self, inevitably affords more meaning in life, a greater sense of identity with worthwhile purposes, more worthy ideals than the nuclear family, whose basic motto must inevitably be eat, drink, and make a living, for tomorrow we die. Earlier this week I heard a psychiatrist giving a lecture on this subject, and he said that this philosophy has become very popular with young people today. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And he said it's a wonderful philosophy of life, as long as you do die tomorrow. But if you don't, then you've got to grow old and weak. Then you've got trouble, because you have nothing to sustain you when your powers fail, and when faith and cooperation with others are the only thing left to sustain you. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Wonderful as long as we die tomorrow. Now, we were always, as Jews, justly proud of the reality of Jewish family life. And now, thanks to modern psychiatry and other modern insights, we understand a little better some of the theoretical insights and background. For thousands of years, Judaism said, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, as a religious injunction. And now the medical profession tells us that it's good for our ulcers too. Have a Jewish family, said the rabbis. And it came over as an injunction on religious grounds. And a lot of people today still think they're a little behindhand in their reading, that having a Jewish family is just good for the rabbi, and maybe up to bar mitzvah, and maybe they should feel a little virtuous about it, but really it's a load of hooey, because it doesn't make any difference one way or other whether they do or they don't have a Jewish family. It's nice, you know, that the children should have a little knowledge about who they are and what they are, but let's not overdo it. Have a Jewish family, said the rabbis. And modern insights, without any shadow of doubt, have added as a postscript, it's good therapeutically for your children and for you. They will be less likely to suffer from alienation. For having a Jewish family identifies you with people and with purposes beyond the span of your own lives. It makes living and it makes dying easier. Our federation is largely concerned with cure in this area. The breakdown of Jewish families, where prevailing mores of swamp Jewish ties, has given the lie to the proverbial Jewish home. We can observe in the 20th century that where there is no authentic extension of the family into trans-familial concerns, the Jewish family shows no different pattern from any other family, and, regrettably, the Jewish husband often proves to be no different from other husbands. Physical violence between husband and wife, between parents and children, well, a little perhaps. Alcoholism, drug addiction, juvenile delinquency, all these are beginning to affect the Jewish homes, and the rate of increase of affect is what is important. And those who still console themselves by saying, well, we're still ahead, you know, we're still ahead, shouldn't look at the situation as it is, but the rate at which the situation is deteriorating. Now, just as an example, culled out of a hat, of what Federation is doing, most importantly in this direction, I have in front of me the Jewish Telegraphic Agency Community News Reporter dated May the 10th. Only last week, a conference took place. The headline, by the way, is Jewish Parents Blamed for Increasing Narcotic Addiction Among Jews. That's what it says. And three critics of Jewish parents were Mayor Diskind, Commissioner of Community-Based Services of the New York State Narcotics Addicts Control Commission, Adolf Wasser, Executive Director of the East New York YM and YWHA, a Federation agency, and Rabbi Richard Shackett, formerly with the Samaritan Halfway Society, a private narcotics treatment center in New York. More than 100 physicians, government officials, social workers, rabbis, and others attended. One of the speakers said, the plague of addiction has unfortunately begun to affect the lives of a significant number of Jewish people, and asked for the setting up of a Jewish agency to deal with Jewish narcotic addiction. It doesn't make sense in terms of the Jewish family as we always imagined the Jewish family was. Mr. Wasser asserted that the failure by Jewish parents to set strong limitations of thou shalt and thou shalt not results in children whose superegos are weak or non-existent. In many cases, he said, these children are unable to accept authority exercised by anyone. They are alienated from our society, and their escape lies in withdrawal into the unreality of a hallucinogenic nirvana produced by opium or drugs. He expressed the belief that the prevention of drug abuse and of the use of narcotics by young people is best ensured if our social agencies, synagogues, and communal institutions teach parents how to use parent power. I knew it was coming. Parent power. And the synagogue and the education agencies have an obligation to teach parents how to use parent power. Now, a most remarkable endorsement of what I said only a few moments ago. Both the rabbi and the commissioner observed that their experiences indicated a low rate of addiction among Jews who had a well-rounded Jewish education. This is not just rabbi talk, believe me. This is evidence based on statistics, where a child has a well-rounded Jewish education, not just so, well, he'll know who he is, and, well, I suppose he ought to know a little about it, and, well, I suppose bar mitzvah is a good idea, but a well-rounded Jewish education, that a child should know where his roots are, and this gives him a sense of ego integrity and stability. For heaven's sake, if you don't believe the rabbis, my dear young Jewish parents, at least listen to the psychiatrists. The commissioner emphasized that he did not wish to convey the impression that Jewish education alone is responsible for successful social adjustment. But he said the cohesive Jewish family structure and the resultant emotional security is a pervasive factor, and the family cohesion is an outgrowth of the Jews' ethical and spiritual standards. Now, I wasn't looking for an endorsement, but I opened this JTA bulletin yesterday, and there it is. Federation is aware that prevention as well as cure is important. It has a well-functioning family life education program which sends speakers to synagogue groups, PTAs, to offer guideposts for sound family living. But is this enough? This is no reflection on Federation, perhaps on us. Are we doing enough for the Jewish family? I have been in the rabbinate now for more years than I care to think. It seems to me that when I look at the synagogue and the davening and the praying and the preaching and the singing and the socializing and the education in school and the outings and the books and the libraries, I see one point where our crucial weakness lies, the one vulnerable area, the one danger zone, which cannot be compensated for by any other area of our Jewish life. And that is the Jewish home, the Achilles heel of Jewish life today. Where the Jewish home is weak, not all the schools and principles and synagogues and davening and praying and preaching in the world will avail. When a man is at home in his home, he will be at home with the world. The home is where we learn the basic experiences of faith, hope, trust, confidence, the ability to cope with our aggression. And the Jew who is Jewishly at home in his home will learn not to fear the attacks made on his ethnicity by the outside world. No matter how strong a Hebrew school is, the teachers cannot do in 6 hours a week what the parents fail to do in 7 hours, in 7 days a week. What is 7 times 24? Well, work it out for yourselves, but anyway, a week. Now, everybody says there's a shortage of money in the Jewish community, and therefore perhaps a family is where we should be concentrating our efforts on. It seems to me that those early years, crucially, between the time the groom says to his bride, Hareat Mekodeshet Li, and the year when the child is first registered in the Hebrew school, which may be the age of 6, 7, and 8, that's when we make them or break them. And there, for the most part, the modern Jewish congregation doesn't see the young people. I don't think it can be said of our congregation that we fail to reflect, and we could just look around this morning, all levels of the age spectrum. But in many congregations, the problem of serious overaging in terms of the demographic structure is crucial. Those years between marriage and the baby being registered for Hebrew school, they are the lost years. What can we do to try to bring young couples into the congregation during these years? I think one of those things that we can do perhaps is trying to make the baby and the parents feel that they belong in the synagogue, that the things that mean so much to the young parent also mean a great deal to the synagogue. I hope on a small scale, through the introduction of a baby blessing ceremony whereby parents can feel involved in the ongoing life of the synagogue. By other activities. I am not saying that the work that the Jewish Family Service is doing is to be criticized. It is wonderful. But largely it deals with breakdowns. And for every breakdown that is reported, there must be hundreds of people who are lost, who do not even bother to seek for help. Nor is sending lectures to synagogues and PTAs enough. Because if the Jewish family is not there to hear the lecture, then we are also missing the main point. We need a concerted campaign on behalf of the young Jewish family if it is to survive. And especially now at a point in Jewish history in America when there is radical heart-searching over the way in which the Federation dollar is being spent. And monies are being channeled now from Federation into Jewish education at a rate never done before in America as the state begins to take over more of the expense of running the hospital. This is an area which those in places of importance in Federation should be cognizant of. The home is where the child becomes Jewish positively or negatively. And just as it was discovered that attempts to raise the level of Negro life in this country failed when they started in school because the battle was already lost or won by the time the child left home, so also must we see our problem of Jewish motivation in this area. I want at this point to congratulate the Society for the Advancement of Judaism on a small beginning, but one which I as a rabbi feel is perhaps one of the most important things we have done as a congregation since I have been in the synagogue. Every single week, thanks to the sponsorship of the Parent Teachers Association and the financial generosity of our women's division, who as always rally to the support of worthwhile projects, we have a babysitting service in our Levy building every single Sabbath morning throughout the year. Now, you may think this is not terribly important, and you may say to me, how many? Let's play the numbers game. Supposing no more than half a dozen parents each week came and participated in that babysitting service. Wouldn't that be something important? Wouldn't that be something important? Parents who are associated with this congregation, they do not have to be members of the congregation, know that if they wish to participate in our activities in the synagogue on Sabbath morning, the congregation says, look, we know how difficult it is to get babysitters on Saturday morning, and believe me, it is. We want to help. All right, it is symbolic. It is a beginning. I look forward to the time when we would have, as part of our professional staff in this synagogue, an ongoing nurse who will always be available whenever there is any activity, short of an activity which takes place late at night. And you know, sometimes perhaps even then, because sometimes you have to go out of your way to let young people know that you're trying to gear your program for their needs. As a matter of fact, when babies are very small, you just wrap them up and put them down and leave them there for a long time. At least we used to. Maybe we did the wrong thing. But you can do it with children. Whenever you have a program where you want to get the young people to come along, think. It's so easy to forget what it's like to be a young parent. I'm an old parent already, and I forget already what it's like. You see, my children are growing up, but when you see little things running around in diapers and you realize that they have to be fed every 5 minutes, and every time they have a little scratch, the mother is still at the stage where she worries terribly. You know, thank God I'm at the stage where I don't worry any longer. At least not like that. But you have to keep on identifying. The ongoing life of a congregation must be a constant process of identifying with all others at all different levels. And of course the young have an obligation to identify with the old. But the old have an obligation to identify with the young. We have to gear our congregational program. And I want to congratulate the SAJ on what I think, symbolic though it may be in terms of the numbers it attracts. This is a most important departure for this congregation. And I hope it will go from strength to strength. And another thing I would like to congratulate this congregation for. I am proud and happy that young people can afford to join this congregation. Now, we live in a time of, I'm not going to give you the costs, it's Shabbos. But you know, we live in a time of rising costs, and it would be most understandable if the Board of Trustees got very tough about this and said, no, everybody has to pay the same because you get all the different uses of the synagogue, and perhaps as young people you need the synagogue more because of the nursery, because of the school. No, our Board of Trustees has not said that. Some of them may have thought it, but they never said that. And the reduction in recent years of the cost of a high school student joining the congregation, of an unmarried person under 35 joining the congregation, or of a married couple under 35. Now, under 35 is quite an age. There are plenty of people I know who are 34 years and 11 months old who are earning a lot more money than people of 79 and 85 that I know. Just because you're young, you don't have to be poor. But again, there is a symbolism involved in this. And I congratulate a community that sees its responsibilities in trying, with all the difficulties involved of trying to make ends meet, of showing young people under 35 And I'm glad they didn't make it 30, because why should we choose 30 as the margin age in this day of ours? Let it be 35. And showing young people that we really want them and need them in our midst. And I hope also that in this synagogue's dedication to the principles of Reconstructionism, both from this pulpit and in our educational programs, which are many and variegated, we are also making things easy for the young people in this sense. Not easy in the sense of lazy, but easy in the sense that we are hopefully in our Reconstructionist philosophy presenting young people with a faith for moderns, something that can make sense of their own religious quest, something that can give meaning and significance to their identity as Jews, something which they can look their children in the eyes and talk to about, something that makes them feel truly proud of being Jews and able to participate in the ongoing life of the Jewish people. Now, quite by accident, tomorrow is Mother's Day, and it's a yontif that I don't, place very highly on the totem pole. I believe that it's largely the creation of the florists and the candy manufacturers. But if we're going to have a Mother's Day, why not have a Grandmother's Day? I don't like this business of setting off maybe I've done something which will be taken over by the caterers and the florists, because if it's not taken over by the caterers and the florists and the candy makers, maybe we can't get anywhere with it. But the fact remains that I don't see any reason for having any particular day. We have a Teacher's Day and a Mother's Day. What's wrong with grandparents? The relationship between grandparents and grandchildren. My mother is with me for a few days, and I've been able to bask in the reflected glory of seeing that relationship. It's quite different from the parent-child relationship. Grandparents play a very important role in family life and a profoundly important role in synagogue life. We want all our families in all their glory, bin oreinu uvizkeinenu, our young and our old. The Jewish family as we see it, which we wish to welcome into the congregation, is the extended family. Uncle, aunts, grandparents, grandchildren, great-grandparents, you name the age, we want it. And this is the Jewish home and the Jewish family, which we wish to foster and encourage. For without the fostering and the encouraging of the Jewish family, Judaism, with all our educational paraphernalia, will wither and decline. For Judaism is not just for the head, it is for the heart and the soul. Judaism is not something merely to be articulated verbally and to be thought about conceptually. Judaism is something to be lived existentially. Past experience, present scientific wisdom, future Jewish survival depend upon whether or not we can all face up to this challenge realistically. Jewish Family Sabbath reminds us of our deep indebtedness to the past, our real obligations in the present to continue to support the magnificent work of federation, and our profound moral and spiritual as well as fiscal responsibility to the future. Amen.